Yes, thank. Okay, good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and the recording will be made available on the Council website for public listening afterwards. Can I remind members to follow the good practice guidance during this meeting? Should you wish to contribute to any item, please write speak in the Teams chat function, and you will be invited to speak inaudible about any new issues. Should your question or issue be raised by a previous speaker, please withdraw your request so we can deal with the business as efficiently as possible. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting for any reason, can I remind you to either leave the Teams meeting for that period or write leave in the Teams chat function and then join, and this will allow us to monitor member presence. We have several important reports to consider today, and I anticipate we'll deal with them in the usual efficient manner. Item number 1 is the surrounding apologies and Chair's approval of members' remote participation. Nick, can I ask you to provide the surrounding and any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. I've not received any apologies, and everyone's present on Teams bar, and this is a bit of a movable feast, but as we speak, I can't see David Ingalls, Jane Maitland, the leader, or Matthew Ronnie present.
I'm here.
I said it was a movable feast, so the leader's here.
Here as well, Nick.
Yeah. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I confirm my agreement that we can all attend remotely. Item number 2 is declarations of interest. Is there any members who wish to make a declaration of interest?
Chair.
Who was that? My tablet is very slow and I can't see who's got their hand up. Gail?
Yeah, Councillor McGregor. Sorry.
I couldn't vote.
Declare an interest in items 4 and 5 due to my role as Cosler Resources spokesperson. I'm involved in negotiations nationally on items contained within both reports, but I don't intend to leave the meeting as I don't believe that my interest precludes me from continuing in the debate. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I have no other members wishing to make a declaration of interest. Item number 3 is minute of the previous meeting on the 17th of November 2020. Can we make a note of the meetings held on the 17th of November 2020? Okay, I'll take that as a yes. Item number 4 is the Local Government Finance Settlement 2021-22 and the impact on the financial strategy. Members are provided with updated information on the Council's overall budget position following the announcement of the Local Government Finance Settlement for 2021-22. We are provided with the details of the settlement and the specific commitments that local authorities are expected to deliver in return for the settlement. This committee is also updated on the projected funding gap, reflecting the settlement and the changes to the Council's budget upgrading assumptions, detailed at section 3.15. Paul Garrett and Gillian Ross are here to assist if members have any questions, and I will open it up to any member questions. Ivor.
Thank you, Chair. It's just with regard to the fact that this has been a sort of extraordinary year with regard to setting budgets, etc. If there's any movement within the terms agreed, or if some of the parties come to agreement to change slightly the budget coming to the Council, will we have the opportunity prior to budget? I know we have to have a budget in by a set date. Will we have the opportunity to change that subsequent to that date? And the other thing is, under 3.20 in the papers, we have the requests from the committees, but there's no figures beside those. Is that because we are currently looking at other ways to fund them, so that the figures that were agreed at committee might not be the same as what they need to be?
Okay, thanks for that, Ivor. I think in relation to 3.20, there's been a number of templates considered by the individual committees, but of course, individual groups could request those templates if they intend to use them in a budget setting process. Paul, I'll bring you in to answer Ivor's first question, because I think you've got the dates for consideration in Parliament of the budget.
Yes, no, thanks, Chair. The parliamentary scrutiny process of the budget is, as you're aware, much later than would normally be the case. The stage 1 consideration of the budget bill is not till the 25th of February, which is after groups are required to submit their budget proposals. I think there's a couple of things. One, I think the prospect of a material change to the budget is probably less than it's been previously because of the timescale. And there was a recognition when the initial budget was announced that councils would be setting their budget before that scrutiny process was able to be undertaken. However, if there is any changes, I would anticipate something similar to what was planned last year, whereby members set a balanced budget in February and council taxes were required to do, and then there was consideration, or there was planned to be consideration of further budget issues at the March meeting of full council. And it may be, if there's anything comes out of the parliamentary scrutiny process, particularly linked into the UK budget announcement, which is due for the 3rd of March. If there's anything comes from that, then I think it would be subsequent to formal budget setting through a future meeting of full council to look at any changes to that.
Okay, Ivor, are you happy with that answer?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, I don't have any other members wishing to come in at this stage, so I will proceed to the recommendations. One thing that I think would be worth considering is that in previous years, we have at this stage supported COSLA's lobbying position, and I think, I'm sure Gail will correct me if I'm wrong, but this year COSLA's sort of main lobbying position for the budget is to baseline the £90 million provided for the council tax freeze, and also to get some support for any future pay increase. And I think, I would certainly propose that we add that as a recommendation just to agree to support COSLA's lobbying position. But I don't have any members want to come in, so I'll turn to the recommendations now. And are we happy to note 1 to 5 on block, and then to also agree to support COSLA's lobbying position?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We'll turn to item number 5, the Council Revenue Budget Monitoring Report for 2020-21 for quarter 3. This report provides an overview of the Council's financial monitoring position for this financial year up to the end of December 2020, including a further update on the main financial implications associated with COVID-19. The report builds on the information presented at the previous meeting of this committee, and we should note the update on the key issues impact on projections provided at paragraph 3.3. The report also provides us with an overall assessment of the implications for this financial year and the approaches to address these. Paul Garrett and Gillian Ross are here to assist members with any questions, and I will open up to questions at this stage. Okay, Ivor?
It's just on, is it the loss of income support? Just wondering when will we find out about that? I notice it's been increased to 200 million. Now, usual formula is I think it's 3% for Dumfries and Galloway. Will that be coming in? And if so, does that mean to say that we'll have a spare couple of million last year or this current year?
Paul?
Yes, a couple of things. The loss of income scheme has been distributed not based on the general overall distribution arrangements, but it's been linked to the level of income loss incurred by councils. We're still receiving about 1.8% of that total, and we're receiving out of the 90 million that's been allocated or indicated so far, just under 1.7 million. There has been some discussion regarding the distribution of the increase in that. It's been increased from 90 million to 200 million. It is anticipated that that will be allocated on the same basis. So I think there's a prospect or even expectation that we will receive in the region of another £2 million through that scheme. I think there's a kind of growing recognition amongst councils at the minute that the COVID response and recovery costs, particularly in relation to loss of income, are not just a current year issue. They're going to follow on into the upcoming financial year and have a significant impact. And a lot of discussion now is about some of the monies that are being allocated by the Scottish Government being carried forward to help address some of the pressures that councils are bound to be facing in the upcoming financial year. And I think we'll be in that position because I'm aware that there is additional monies still being allocated, but they're largely being allocated to help support pressures that will be incurring in the upcoming financial year.
Okay, and just are we aware of a date that we'll find it out for definite, Paul?
I think there's an expectation that this may be reflected in the final budget bill. So I would hope to have formal confirmation of that prior to the end of the current financial year, certainly. But I mean, I think we're fairly confident on the kind of distribution arrangements for that. I think it may be considered at leaders at the upcoming meeting at the Cause of Leaders, just to confirm some of the distribution arrangements. So hopefully we'll be able to give confirmation of that fairly soon.
Okay, thank you. I've got nobody else wanting to come in to speak, so are we happy? I'll turn to the recommendations, and are we happy to note 1, 2 and 3 on block?
Thank you.
Okay, we'll turn to item number 6, Finance and Procurement Revenue Budget Monitoring Report for 2020-21. This report gives members an overview of the financial performance of the Finance and Procurement Service for the period to December 2020. I'm pleased with the projected position for the service that a balanced budget will be achieved. Paul Garrett and Gillian Ross are here to assist us with any questions. Is there any questions from members? No. I will therefore turn to the recommendations, and are we happy to note 1 and 2 on block? And I'll take that as a yes. We'll now turn to item number 7, which is a review of the Internal Financial Procedures and Procurement Standing Orders Implementation Plan. Following this committee's review during 2020 and the decision at full council in December to agree our recommendations, we are presented with an implementation plan as a result of this review. In determining our review recommendations, we specified the format of the implementation plan, and the report highlights that the information presented reflects our requirements. We are also asked to agree to put in place the resources required to implement the recommendations, and the report highlights the level of resources that officers have assessed are needed to match the ambition and scale of the changes we wanted to see. Lorna Meehan, Paul Garrett, Vlad Valente and Mike Shepley are here to assist members with any questions. Just at the outset, I think the administration will propose that we slightly reword recommendation 3, and that is that we just agree the funding rather than agree to recommend the funding. But I will open up to members' questions. Ivor.
Chair, I note that this is a funding package for, I think it's 2 years. If we're putting in staffing in place for 2 years, do they become permanent posts, or do they acquire permanent rights, employment rights through this? And it's just, will this be an ongoing cost, or is it just for these 2 years?
Okay. I will bring in Paul first of all, but I appreciate that we might want to bring in Steve and Vlad as well.
Yeah. In relation to the procurement resource, there is recognition in the report that there will need to be, during this period, an assessment of the ongoing requirement within the central procurement team. I would stress that it's unlikely to be anywhere near the level we're talking about over this 2-year change and improvement period. It would be much reduced from that level, and it would also take into account members' considerations of to what extent they wish to see procurement activity delegated back out into the services and what they see as being the appropriate balance between the central team and the operations within the service departments. So there's certainly no decision or commitment based on today's recommendation beyond that initial 2-year period. But as we've reflected in the report, we would want to come back to members towards the end of that improvement and change process to outline proposals going forward. But I would expect at a much lower level than we're requesting during that change period.
Okay, is there anything that Steve or Vlad wants to add to that?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, Ivor, does that answer your question?
So there's no employment rights if they're here for 2 years. Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought it was if they're here longer than a year, they acquire employment rights.
Lorna?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Hislop's right that in engaging staff for a period of time, then they do receive employment rights. The council does exercise fixed-term contracts regularly, and we conduct those contracts in terms of HR law. So while people may accrue rights, those rights are enshrined in their contract, and the way we handle the termination of those contracts as well. So it's not an unusual issue. I think, as Paul suggested, that while the funding will be required for 2 years, the permanency of the staff over that 2-year period will be at different levels. So some staff might be engaged over 12 months. So there'll be a range of different options in there, and also the opportunity to work with Scotland Excel, particularly on seconded basis from other organisations. So there'll be a whole mix in there, but to reassure members that the requirements will be finite within the 2-year period for the funding.
Okay, Jane?
Thank you, Adam. I suppose really, Adam, I'm picking up slightly from what Ivor is saying about the justification for the staffing complement. It's not to me completely clear from the section at the back as to why exactly we require precisely what we've got. I think I would like to see a bit more justification come to members, and I'm sure it can. I don't think there's any difficulty in that, to indicate to members what the options are and where we're putting resource. Because above everything, I mean, oddly enough, this actually is in some ways a commissioning procurement exercise in respect of our own needs to improve procurement, and members would expect to see options. I particularly think that the requirement for extra legal staffing is not absolutely clear from the appendix. So I'm looking to have, I think, a little bit more clarity about what's required. I mean, for example, the public sector internal audit standards. We weren't told, at audit and risk that needed extra resource to be done. It's already scheduled, and I'm not entirely clear why we need more. So it's that type of thing that I think members ought to be given further information about. I'm very happy to see this implementation plan here. I hope that we will be able to see a picture almost of it as we move across. And I would look to see, I think probably in the future, something like a Gantt chart to explain what's been happening and when. I think that can come to the committees to show progress. Above all, I want to say that the thing that really strikes me is it's the contracts register. I do not think that members really understood just how thin that contract register was, how incomplete it was, and for members and the public to be able to see what's going on, that I think is the absolute nub, and the sooner that's sorted out, the better. But in the immediate, Adam, it's about showing to the public that we are getting value for money, you know, and as far as the staff is concerned, putting these staff in, what are you and I going to get in return for really what is a very large lump of money? So I think I'll leave my remarks there at the moment, and maybe officers can come back and help me on that.
No, I completely appreciate what you're saying, Jane, and I think, of course, during the review, that desire to make sure that we are getting value for every penny and pound that we spend is important. I think one thing I'll say at this stage before I bring in officers is that obviously we're agreeing in sort of an estimated £1.5 million over the next 2 years. So there's absolutely no reason why we couldn't bring back those further details. And I think that it isn't just a case of saying we're going to recruit staff for 2 years in a fixed term contract. There are, you know, officers have mentioned Scotland Excel. There are other bodies where we could actually offer a much better employment experience and actually make sure that we are not just employing more officers, but we're actually giving them the development opportunities and the opportunities to work with other organisations to further improve our own functions. But what I'll do at this stage is I'll bring in Paul Garrett and Steve Atherton for the procurement side, and then I'll bring in Vlad Valenti for the legal staff.
Thanks, Chair. I'll invite Steve in a second, because Steve's already been involved in quite significant discussions about, if we do get approval today, how we would ensure we get the resources in place, and he's had some quite detailed and productive discussions with Scotland Excel. So rather than go into that too much, I'll maybe just ask Steve to come in, if that's okay.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Chair. So you're absolutely right. The manning levels will be mix and match. They'll be mix and match in terms of where we get them from, i.e. we self-recruit and we use other areas of expertise around Scotland. But it'll also be mix and match in terms of some will be in, as Lorna said, for maybe 6 months, some will be in for 12 months. Few will be in for 2 years, because I think this is about focused pieces of work to get a deliverable to meet members' requirements, and then we move them out. So I've had detailed discussions with SXL around putting together almost a project team under our control, under our management, under our direction, where we can utilise their higher level of skill, and they happen to be recruiting at the moment, for us to be able to deliver. And that gives us also the benefit of being able to utilise a lot of their documentation templates, so we're not reinventing a wheel. So that should hopefully speed implementation up. So on the resourcing side, it will be mix and match. This is a top end estimate in terms of requirement for money, and I would see it being done earlier. I think just to go down that in terms of a Gantt chart going forward, that absolutely would be normal practice, that we would produce a detailed Gantt chart that would give yourselves or anyone who wants to see it exactly what we're doing, where we're at, and where the potential conflicts of resources are. So we're always looking ahead rather than reacting to issues. The contracts register side, if I may, just sort of deal with that one. As you know, one of the actions is that by the end of June, we will have had this period where we've gone out to directors, said, please bring out the information that you've got, and let's have a look, and then we can put forward a contract plan in order to then populate the contract register. But that's predicated on us having the resource, because whilst we ask the people for the actual detail of where you're not compliant or where there are areas of concern, I think it's important that we give you members the confidence that we've also then gone in and just check to make sure it happens. So hence the need for those resources. So I think the plans are there, we're ready to go, and I think once we get the approval from members, Chair, I think we can kick this off fairly quickly.
Okay, thank you. Vlad?
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning to all. In terms of the legal element of it, what I would suggest is certainly from my end, obviously I've only just come into the organisation, and as such I'm still carrying out the assessment that I promised through my interview process, and that will be an ongoing assessment as to what we require within the governance and assurance portfolio. However, one of the things that I highlighted through that process, and I would like to highlight at this point, is my aim and objective is to provide you with the right governance and assurance of that, that we have the right processes and procedures in place, and that includes having the right infrastructure of staffing in place. Now, for that, we require more early intervention type work. And getting the various governance and assurance portfolio teams involved within the processes in terms of project managing, contracts and so on. And I would want particularly in regards to legal, to be much more involved in all of that. Now, what I can see from just a quick glance, I've only been here in the council for a month, but a quick glance, I can see that the legal team's already stretched within the remits that they currently have, and they haven't been previously been involved in early intervention type work, which is what we require. And I certainly require to give you that assurance. Accordingly, what I've proposed is an estimate in terms of bringing in 5 professionals to allow me the time and allow me the space to set up the infrastructure that we require as a council moving forward, so that I can give you that governance and assurance. It is an estimate. Of course, if we can do it with less, great. But I would suggest at this point in time, I need that grace period to, one, assess it, but more importantly, I need the staffing to actually deliver on it.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think coming back to your point, Jane, we can absolutely have further reports, particularly on the procurement side, to this committee, and I'm sure that Communities Committee will want to maybe assess that further too. I'll bring in Stephen Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. It was actually a question around about the amnesty that's mentioned in a couple of places within the document. I mean, there is a sort of, how many assurances does it take to change compliance, to sort of parody an old joke, but I think compliance has been the theme throughout from a lot of elected members through the workshops, etc. And I think the amnesty is welcomed. It does talk about on page 98 that subject to there being no fraud or other inappropriate activity, there would be an amnesty. To get that detail provided in 2 months of issuance of the letters to directors. So I'm just sort of, it's really just to firm up that timeline, because obviously we'll have future meetings of this committee or future briefings to members. And in terms of the contract register, as already been touched on, I mean, it beggars belief how much more we could have delivered had we been in the times when we had more budget. But I would like to know when that will come back and which committee will come back in terms of that amnesty being closed, if you like, and then we've finally got a contract register or details to inspect, because obviously it can't be endless. It does suggest a few months there, but a wee bit of clarity on that would be welcome. Thanks.
Steve?
Thank you, Chair. So yes, the amnesty is going to be time-bound, i.e. 2 months. Obviously, the criteria of saying subject to fraud, because that's the right and proper thing to do. But at the end of that 2 month period, we should have identified, or the director should have identified, areas within their services that have perhaps not got the contracts in place they should have, or have perhaps been spending council money without the right contracts in place. So that is time-bound, 2 months, and then after that, we would come back to this committee and really give a picture of where we are, but also the work needed then to get the right contracts in place or to get the right agreements in place, and how we're going to get there. Because if we find there is a block of work needed, you can't do that overnight. But the key is, first of all, is to know what you know. And so that's the reason for it being time-bounded. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Can I just, Chair, sorry, it was actually just to say, so which committee will that come? Will we see that at?
Okay, Steve.
This committee should, in my view, unless Chair you have anything different, because it's one of the recommendations. So my view would be, through obviously Lorna and Paul, that it would come back to this committee because it's a direct recommendation to this committee.
Apologies, sorry. Which instance of this committee? So which month would we see it at?
I'd have to defer to Paul on that because I haven't seen the forward programme, if I may. But I would think it'd be whatever is, if I assume there's one in August, and I don't know whether there is, it would be that one because the period ends at the end of June, and then to give us the opportunity to give members a full picture would take probably a month.
From memory, committees in September, and I think that's outlined on page 99 of. Okay, Ronnie has a question at this point. I'll bring you in now, Ronnie.
Thank you, Chair. I couldn't get the mute button off. Apologies. It's just a question on that, about Stevens, and I don't know that. There's obviously the amnesty, which is 2 months. I had rehearsed before about questions regarding that amnesty, but that's passed now. But I'm still querying financial procedures, because I mean obviously this amnesty, and some people that have deliberately ignored these financial procedures in the past, I don't see even an amnesty how we will learn anything from that if they don't come forward. I think there is a double issue on that. That is one of them. The other one is, if we don't challenge the deliberate ignoring financial procedures in the past, or for whatever reason, I think we'll just carry on doing the same thing all the time with individuals. So I think it doesn't, it's not a witch hunt any means or manner, but I think it has to be challenged at some time so that people learn lessons that have actually been through that before.
Okay, Steve. Oh, sorry, Paul.
Yeah, just in terms of Ronnie's question, I fully recognise that this review was much wider than just procurement, and the financial procedures was a key element as well. Page 104, 103 and 104 of the report refers to recommendations, particularly regarding training, but as well as training, it's really about assurances regarding both the capabilities of our budget holders to undertake their responsibilities in terms of financial management and ensuring that they comply with the relevant requirements. So we've talked in there about the linkage between budget holder responsibility and their ability to undertake and authorise financial transactions. And the intention is in June this year to come back to this committee with details of the revised budget delegation arrangements, updated refreshed budget management structure, and to give members an assurance on the training that's been undertaken to support that updating. The other thing I would say is that in our discussions with service departments on this, we'll be stressing the need, as we have done in the past, but even more to a greater extent now with the profile through this process, of the need to ensure that those in budget management posts are actually both trained and capable of undertaking those responsibilities. So we'll come back to members with a bit more detail on that, as reflected in the paper at the June meeting of this committee.
Okay. Steve, is there something you want
to
add?
If I may, Chair, just so once we find out what has gone awry by collecting the information, then we have already, and I'm already having discussions about putting in place both a training program, but also a coaching program for everybody from, let's say, directors down to the requisitioner, so that then that removes the opportunity or the excuse that we didn't know or we don't know. The new people that we're bringing in as well for this period of transformation will also look to make sure that the checks and balances will be in place, which have perhaps not been as strong as they might have been in the past. Plus, with that, is to make sure all the templates, forms, etc., are usable and user-friendly. Because if you make it difficult for people, then by and large they'll try and find ways around it. So it's a combination of all of those elements that will make sure that we pick up what's gone wrong, we learn from that, and we make sure that we train, coach, and give people the tools to do it going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Ian Crothers.
Thanks, Chair. I'll come back to the point I think that maybe Ivor brought up. Thank you for bringing that up, and Jane's kind of mentioned it as well. It's intrigued her, but I personally think your recommendation at 2.3, just to agree with the funding. It's 2 weeks today. I was looking. We'll present our budgets. We'll have a greater understanding of the whole budget at that point. Other service and the corporate committees, but other service committees have certainly said, listen, we recommend this as part of the budget process, and this is a different stance for some reason. This is predominantly about non-compliance, bringing that into order, and I think this committee's done a fantastic job of that, and I'm on record of saying that. So I think to wait another couple of weeks and see this go through the budget process, I think would be much better. I think pick up on Jane's point in particular, we'll get a chance to better understand what does this really mean. What Paul's saying is that, do you know what? This is really an overestimation of 1.582, nearly £1.6 million. We'll bring it in well within those figures, but I need to understand, absolutely, for the sake of waiting another couple of weeks, that what these figures are. Will we use redeployment? Will we use resources from other councils? How does that work? And what do we think the actual figure will look like? So I would disagree with you, Chairman, as far as agreeing this. And we're agreeing up to, I think, is what you're saying is 1.582. But I think for the sake of waiting another couple of weeks, we should wait and apply the same route as what we've been using with service committees and recommend this as part of the budget process. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, I mean, we can come back to the recommendations, of course, but obviously at full council in December, there was quite a keenness to press ahead with implementing this review as quickly as possible. And I think certainly that's what the administration was intending to do, but we can come back to that at the recommendations. I'll bring in Dick.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a few questions. Just confirmation from Paul that the change fund is only for non-recurring expenditure items to either affect improvements or savings in the budget. I think that's important because in 2 years' time, when this project is, the initial part of the project is complete, then I don't think our finances are in a great place because the country is going to be paying back trillions of pounds of debt. So I think that's important that we get that confirmation on that. The report mentions the purposes. One of the purposes is to achieve value for money. Is there projected savings which we think we can make from our improved compliance? I'd like to hear about that. And also the proposal is to move procurement from a lot of the procurement from service departments into the centre. What will happen to the staff involved in these service departments? Will there be a downsizing in the departments, or will some of the resources be moved to the centre to support the project? Thank you.
Paul?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to confirm for Councillor Brodie, absolutely the change fund, the purpose of it is to support investment in change and improvement and delivery of savings, so it's there for that purpose rather for any recurring needs, and obviously this proposal meets with those requirements in as much as, one, it's a significant change process, but as your second part of your question alluded to, a big element of it is value for money. And I think that the council's procurement spend, I mean, it varies year on year, but generally around about the 170 to 180 million pounds mark. And I think it's essential that the council improves value for money through the utilisation of that procurement spend. And I would expect to see significant return on investment through this change process. It's difficult to quantify. I've been having initial discussions with Stephen. I'll ask maybe Steve to come in, but actually quantifying that return on investment is difficult at this stage. But I would certainly expect to see it exceeding the level of investment members are being asked to agree. And we can maybe look at providing some information back to members on how we would capture and identify the level of savings and improved value for money they're getting from this investment as we go through the process. But I don't know, Steve, if you want to add anything to that at this stage.
No, I think just to reinforce, I think at this point in time, we've got to look at it in two ways, I believe, and that is reflect on would what has happened at the start of this, i.e. the Transerve, could we have avoided that happening? And I think the answer is if this was all under better control and compliance, I think we could have done. So that's the first point. When it comes to value for money, absolutely. My experience tells me we should be getting better value for money. If I may, I would shy away from the word savings. Why? Because people tend to use that in a very blunt way, and it's 3% on this, 4% on that. Whereas for this kind of program, I would expect to be able to demonstrate to you at the end of the process, as Paul said, a return on investment. So worst case, it pays for itself. I would expect it to be a multiple of the cost, but we can't quantify that just at this moment in time until we see how much. If you can imagine, we've got a lot of contracts out there, or a lot of agreements out there that are not contracted for. And as soon as you look at those, that gives us a lever in which we can go to the market and we can start looking at the sort of recovery, the benefits. So until we get to that point, it's difficult to quantify, but it's something that we should be coming back to members with as we go through this year and talk about return on investment. In terms of service areas, what we are really planning is that we bring the procurement back to the centre first of all, until we do the improvement, the cultural change, the process and all that. And then we would pass it back out, knowing that it is all tuned like a great sports car, and people are trained and coached and the tools are in place. Currently today, the people that carry them out are generally not whole people. Everybody does a little bits and parts of their job. So there's no person out there you say, yeah, we can move that person or whatever, by and large. So that's why we've taken the view of bringing people in, do as I've just said, and then we pass it out. Now, how much we pass out, I think, is something that we must come back to members with around how would you like the delegations to look? Dumfries and Galloway operate the most devolved scheme of delegation for procurement in Scotland. Most tend to be a little bit more centre-led. We pretty much have sent most of ours out, but I think that's something that members would want to have a view on going forward, because the more you push it forward, it increases the opportunity for inappropriate behaviours, risk, and probably more importantly, it's quite difficult to keep hold of standard approaches. So towards the end of this year, very early next year, we would look to come to you and say, well, these are the options for managing, delivering procurement going forward, all the way from everything centre to everything devolved. Let's talk through those, and then members can express a view based on your appetite for risk and based obviously on your need to be able to influence and get involved. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Jock.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Actually, that gentleman just said very much what I was thinking. My view on procurement is that it should be run through a central group who have their hands-on knowledge of procurement and what should be happening, and everything should run through them. Given what we've got with the trunk roads and that sort of thing, it's a big issue, and it gives us a lot of concern. But whether are you looking at training local people to take this job on, or are you looking to bring in people in? I'm not entirely happy that your suggestion about bringing people in for a couple of years and training, and that's very important. The training is very important. But I would look at long term. Do we have a group centralised who control these procurements or go through these procurement processes and make sure everything's being done properly? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I think that's the step that I'm talking about towards the end of this year, early next year, where we decide with yourselves as members, we put options that says, do you want it central? Do you want it centrally controlled but with specialists out in the areas? Or do you actually want, as it is today, and by and large, and that is where the services control it all themselves? And that model, I think, is informed and predicated first on members' wishes, first and foremost, second on the overall council's appetite for risk, and third, I think, on how far this improvement journey, because we bring these people in to get everything correct so that we're not trying to build the future on shifting sand. So once you've done those, we can then propose models to yourselves and suggest the way forward.
That sounds good. Thank you very much.
Ivor.
Thank you, Chair. It was Mr. Valiente said that the 5 staff, I think, that he was looking to bring in were an estimate. Now, if we bring the 5 in at the beginning and we find that that's been a slight overestimate and it frees up too much capacity, can we do the work in a less period, or do we need to honour the contracts for the length of time that we would take them on? Because, you know, if 5's needed and we can actually get a saving through maybe too many people being there and freeing up plenty of capacity to do the work that we need to do, then I'm happy with that. But if it's a case of we need 5 and 5, fair enough. But I wouldn't like to think we've got 5 in and say we only needed 4, and then that other 20% of the time they're sitting twiddling their thumbs. I realise I won't be doing that, but just can we get out of the contracts early if needed?
Vlad?
Yeah, thanks very much for the question, Chair. In terms of the longer term question as to the contracts, obviously I would need to speak to HR on that very specific point. You can make fixed term contracts on a 1-year basis, and therefore we can review it at that point. So that's an option, and that's an option for us to manage internally. However, what I would suggest is, in terms of the quality that you probably want to bring in, obviously you would attract better level of candidates in having a 2-year fixed term. What I would give the absolute assurance is, if we were to use the full funding that's been proposed to bring in 5 members of staff in, they certainly won't be wasted, and if they don't play into this, they'll play into the general governance and assurance role that I've got to lead on for the council. And as I said earlier, I think there's quite a big piece of work there, particularly as I can see some of the governance and assurance teams are significantly stretched at this point in time, which is not allowing them to do the prevention work. So if there were to be extra capacity, we would certainly put that to good use to ensure that we're doing the prevention work. And just tapping into some of the savings questions that were asked earlier, I can't also offer at this point in time any savings, but what I can offer is that if we put the right infrastructure in, what we can prevent is losses. We can prevent that by having the proper controls in place to manage contracts specifically, but in general governance, and preventing litigation, preventing other issues arising, and certainly losses like the ones that we have currently seen. So that would be the assurance I would give, that just setting up that proper infrastructure with the staffing that's been proposed is not going to waste in any shape or form.
Okay, Jane.
Thank you, Adam. I suppose I'm going back to the notion of how will members measure success, Adam, and I think it was Steve who talked about return on investment, and good return on investment, I hasten to add, not merely a return on investment. So I hope that anything that comes to us will be shaped around that sort of language, and that we can see as far as members are concerned, what we're getting for putting the resource in. I don't have any difficulty with putting resource in. It's quite obvious from the independent approach that's been taken to this, where we had a critical and expert eye cast over our procedures, and I'm afraid we all drew back and said, "Ow!" Clearly it's just not absolutely right at all. But if I can be sure that, so I'm saying that I'm not unhappy about putting in resource. I just want to be absolutely clear what we're getting for it. So it's to reinforce the message that the return on investment is the sort of way that we want to shape measurement of success, and for members to be able to say to the public, look, this is what we're using your money for. Yes,
no, absolutely, and I agree with you, and I think that it's very important that, first of all, we reflect that it has been difficult in the past to recruit to legal and to procurement. That's why we've done significant grow your own in the past. So we do need to be flexible, but of course we do need to get that return on this investment. I'll bring in Lorna at this point.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Maitland, I think to reassure you that the report acknowledges, I think, quite clearly that the overall impact of taking all this action is really the ultimate aim of the review, to see the change that members wish to achieve from the review, and to see the culture change, the capacity building, and indeed the assurances that members are seeking. I think in terms of the regular updates to this committee, I think it would be fair, and also within the report we've made clear that at times then members will take a view that with officers that maybe a change in tact, acceleration, maybe a re-emphasis on certain things as we work through this programme is required. So I think that open dialogue and the reporting of the use of the resources and how they are having impact in the areas that members wish to see will be important for us to present information on and evidence. So to reassure you, that's the intention of the approach, and to provide that flexibility for members to redirect or re-emphasise points as we work our way through the programme of work.
Okay, are you quite happy with that, Jane? Thank you. Ronnie?
I'll take my hand down because it's been partly said, but I do agree with Stephen, Vlad, and like Jane, I think there should be investment where it is due. But I think Stephen and Vlad have identified, and all the reports we've had have identified shortages of experience and staff to carry out a proper job. And I think this is where we're going now. We're actually investing in, trying to get the job done, and so we don't get back into the same scenarios as we have done before. An example of that, is the legal team. I know for years and years they have been stretched, and perhaps they should have had some investment previously. They do one case in social work, for example, can take months of one person's time. So I think we have to look at what they're actually doing, what we're asking them to do, and like David, I think somebody that's dealing with whether it be finance and procurement on a regular basis will have that experience and will have the time to put to that, and I think we can only benefit from that and that kind of investment.
Okay, thank you, Ronnie. I don't have any other members wishing to come in at this point, so I will turn to the recommendations. I'm mindful of the discussion that we've had, and I think we've had a good discussion, and I'm keen to get consensus across the board on this issue. I think that we have had consensus the whole way through this review, and I appreciate what Ian said. I wondered if actually maybe I'm quite keen to go with recommendation 3, as I had stated earlier on, but I wonder if there's maybe actually something above in recommendation 4. I think that members are quite keen to get into a bit more of the detail about how we're going to deploy additional funding in these areas. But I'm also quite conscious that obviously in terms of legal and internal audit, they do report to communities committee. So actually there's maybe a need to sort of either through a workshop or through another means to get into a lot of the bigger detail and a lot of the minute detail on some of these issues, because I think that there's a clear desire from members to really get into the nitty gritty on some of these issues, and I appreciate that Jane referred to return on investment. So I'll bring in Ian. I see you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not totally averse to what you're saying, but I suppose I'd like to take advice in regards to the comments that I made from Paul Garrett, I suppose it would be, and that's what difference does the 2 weeks make? So is it only a fortnight away? And I think actually to get back, and even as individual groups say, okay, 1.582 million, what does this really mean? I see this stuff coming in through the chat in regards to permanency, why the fixed term contracts are there. So there's a number of issues that could still be clarified. It would certainly give me a bit more, I think, I'd feel better about it. I just feel better about it, Chairman, in real terms. So if I could ask a question of Paul in regards to that. I mean, I'm not adverse to what you're saying, but if I could ask a question of Paul Garrett in regards to what I've just stated, Chairman.
Paul?
Thanks, Chair. No, as Ian says, I mean, it would be a 2-week delay, and we made reference earlier on to a lot of the preparation work that's been done to move things forward as quickly as possible once members do take the decision. Steve's been in quite detailed conversation with Scotland Excel on elements of that. I mean, obviously, two weeks wouldn't make a huge difference, but we'd be very keen to move things on as quickly as possible, obviously. I suppose the other thing I would mention in terms of, Ian made reference to the other kind of policy development initiatives. I mean, I wouldn't see this necessarily as a policy development initiative that would generally be considered as part of budget proposals. We're talking about the results from an extended review undertaken by the committee of the need for change and improvement within the council, and this is the results from that review, and rather than being funded from the underlying budget, the proposal in this paper is to fund that from the Change Fund, and I'm confident the Change Fund can accommodate that level of investment at this stage. But as Ian said in the initial part of his question, it would just be a 2-week delay, so it's really up to members whether they want to do that today or to leave that until budget setting in a fortnight's time.
Chairman, just in the back of what Paul said there, can I just ask a question in regards to, so if Change Fund, this is about one-off, impact on revenue should be minimum is what I'm hearing, but I just want clarity in regards to that, because what you've just said, Paul, so in 2 years' time we're saying this is cost neutral.
Yes, in response to an earlier question, I think it was Ivor's question, Ian, highlighted that there's absolutely no commitment from today's decision beyond that 2-year period. That is a specific time-limited investment to the levels indicated in the report. What I would say on top of that is that certainly the procurement side and potentially on the governance and assurance side as well, as we go through the process, we would expect to come back to members to set out proposals in relation to the ongoing arrangements, which may mean an increase in the central teams. It will really depend on members' considerations on how they would like to see the split of activity undertaken going forward between the central team and the services. So that's something we'd like to come back to members on as we near the end or the latter part of this change process, but there's absolutely no commitment today for ongoing resources through the recommendations.
Okay, Elaine?
Thanks. It's just a minor point, but we're not setting the budget in 2 weeks' time. It's 3 weeks' time, where the budget setting was postponed by a week to enable us to ascertain the results of stage 1 of the finance bill, which going through the Scottish Parliament, which goes through in 2 weeks today. So we will not be setting the budget in 2 weeks' time. So it's not a 2-week delay, it would be a 3-week delay. I know that's only a minor point, but I don't want the expectation to be out there that the budget will be set in 2 weeks' time. Thanks.
The point I made, Chairman, sorry, apologies. The point I made was the budget proposal will be in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, Ivor?
It just seems a bit odd that every other committee has to actually report to here to get changes, whereas we as a committee have the right to do what we like. But I hope I'm not sounding like that parish council. I was looking down the sort of delegations, and where does it say we have the power to actually implement agree the budget? It says here we've got to make recommendations to full council where appropriate on the transformation of the council. well, this is a transformation of a council service. So should we not actually just recommend, as per the current recommendations, to agree to recommend that funding is made available rather than actually agree that the funding is available?
I mean, in this respect, we've done it many times. Policy and Resources Committee did it before us. I think, you know, that there's some key issues here. First of all is a delay. You know, I'm quite keen to avoid a delay. At the same time, though, I think, you know, this is going to be a bit of a moving feast. You know, we could agree that this is exactly what we want. We might want to recruit. We might want to do a mix of something else. We might actually go out and struggle to actually get any applicants. That has certainly happened to us in the past. So there's a couple of issues there that I think I'm quite keen to move this on, but also appreciating that it is a bit of a movable feast. That, you know, maybe we actually need a further workshop, because I think what members want to get to is greater certainty, and as Jane said, that sort of confirmation that there will be a good return on investment. And I don't think you achieve that solely by waiting 3 weeks to put in a budget proposal. And obviously this is coming from the change fund rather than the revenue budget. I think Lorna wants to come in.
Thank you, Chair. I think you picked up the point. The delegations to FPT committee through the use of the change fund were set out by members, and therefore use of the change fund sits with the FPT committee in terms of decision. And in terms of the timelines and the position that we're in, this is a response to members' desire at full council in December that this committee would receive an implementation plan, which necessarily would require resources to implement and deliver. So that's the position we're in today. The timing wasn't necessarily the most fortuitous in terms of budget setting, but it certainly was the kind of position that members desire to see quick progress and clarity of delivery.
Jane?
Thanks, Adam. Do you know, actually, when Ivor produced that thought about the delegations, I skidded toward the ooh. I wonder if that's right. But Lorna's been helpful and made it clear that we do have the power. Do you know, while I totally understand where Ian and Ivor are coming from, my instinct is to move on with this for the sake of just getting on with it, and the fact that we do have the power to use the change fund to do this to start this process of transformation, because that's exactly what this is. This is really important to get this right. If we get this right, there are all sorts of things which will flow from it. If we get it wrong, we will continue to flounder around and not enjoy the confidence of the public. So I would suggest, on the basis that because it is time limited, we've been told that very clearly, Chairman, I think I'm quite happy to go along with the recommendations as you started, with the alteration that you made at the beginning of the meeting. So I hope that everybody will agree. We've come so far with agreement that I hope that we can move on that basis.
Okay, I'll bring in Ronnie, and then I hope to move to the recommendations at that stage. But I am very keen that members are able to have their say. I think this is a very important issue. But I'll bring in Ronnie.
I think you're right, Chair. And you know, I was listening to Jane there, and I agree with her. I agreed with you from the start, and I agree that change should be happening in 2.3.
Okay, thank you for that. So I've got nobody else wanting to come in at this point, so I will move to the recommendations. So the first recommendation is to review and agree the implementation plan. I think it is very fair to say we have reviewed it. Are we happy to agree the implementation plan?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item number 2 is to agree the resourcing requirements identified in the implementation plan. Are we happy to agree that?
Agreed.
Yep. Okay. Item number 3, I had proposed a change that we agree that funding to enable the implementation plan of an estimated 1.582 million over 2 years, and summarised at paragraph 3.9, is met from the Corporate Change Fund, given that the purpose of this work is to drive the change and improvement of the Council's procurement activities, resulting in both greater compliance and enhanced value for money. Are we happy to agree that?
Agreed.
Okay, and then item number 4, subject to 2.2, 2.3 and 2.4, agree to receive regular updates on the progress on the implementation plan and deployment and use of the funding and resources allocated. Are we happy to agree that?
You put a date on it, schedule on that, quarterly or 6 monthly?
There is a couple of dates outlined within the improvement plan as it states. There's also some further decisions that we'll take on sort of continuous monitoring reports. However, I think members will probably welcome that if a report needs to come to committee before 6 months' time, it needs to come in, and I would envisage, particularly on the resourcing requirements and when we come to deploy funding, that there will be reports not just to this committee, but obviously for internal audit and legal, to communities committee. And I did mention that maybe actually a workshop would be quite useful for members to actually get into the detail, and of course we would organise a workshop before a report came to committee.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay, we're happy to agree that.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for that. We'll now move on to item number 8, which is further development of the capital investment strategy. This report develops the Council's capital investment strategy to reflect recent developments, including the announcement of the 2021-22 local government finance settlement and updated information in relation to agreed and potential future investment priorities. Paul Garrett and Alan Gass are here to assist if members have any questions. I believe that Paul has some details on some corrections from a recent announcement, so I will bring Paul in at this stage.
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's an adjustment to the level of general capital grant, which impacts on recommendation 2.1. And the recommendation indicated that although general capital grant levels across Scotland remain flat, that this council was looking like it would get a small distribution benefit of £168,000. After these papers were out, the Scottish Government contacted COSLA last Friday to indicate that there needed to be an adjustment, a correction to the general capital grant levels, and that correction has reduced our allocation by £193,000 next year. So instead of a small distribution benefit of 168,000, we've got a small distribution loss of 25,000. So it's not a significant issue in terms of obviously of the overall value of the council's capital investment strategy, but what we'll need to do is update the templates that groups will be working from when they're submitting their capital investment strategy proposals, and we'll do that in consultation with the relevant groups.
Okay, thank you. Could you give us that number again, Paul? The
value of the adjustment, Adam, is £193,000. So that basically means that the 168,000 increase that is reflected at paragraph 2.1 is now a £25,000 loss or reduction in our distribution share.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And I'll now open it up to member debate. Is there any members who wish to come in at this point? Ivor?
Just checking. Appendix 1 of the report, we're not agreeing that today as the way forward. That's just there for noting, and the budget will be set on 3 weeks' time. This is just information to help us set our budget. Right, thanks.
Okay, is there any other members who wish to come in? Nope. Okay, so I will move to the recommendations. Are we happy to note 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 on block, but recognising that the wording of recommendation number 1 has changed to receive a small decrease of 25p in core funding? We're happy to agree that on block? Okay, yep. Thank you very much. Item number 9 is the Capital Investment Strategy Monitoring Report 2020-21 for quarter 3. This report provides members with an update on the financial and physical progress of the capital investment strategy for the current financial year up to December 2020. We're advised of key issues in relation to the overall funding of the strategy, including the impact of COVID-19 on delivery of physical work. Our request for a variation from the Economy Resources Committee for the Glenluce Traveller site is also highlighted and included within the recommendations. Paul Garrett and Alan Gass are here to assist if members have any questions. and I will open up to member debate. Stephen?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just on the capital receipts section, 3.8, on page 174. We've got obviously a target, but it's actually on the top of page 175. It talks about an income from the former caravan site in Lockerbie licence equating to around £5,000, and it's logged against the total capital receipts. As we now know, certainly members of that ward will know, that's actually common good land. So shouldn't that money be credited towards the common good fund and not towards the general capital receipts for the council? I mean, the common good in Lockerbie would certainly welcome it, but yeah, could that be maybe corrected, please?
Paul?
Happy to look into that and then come back to Councillor Thompson to confirm the position in relation to it. I wasn't aware that that was a common good issue, but if that is the case, happy to have a look into it and come back to Councillor Thompson with the details.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got no other members wanting to come in on this item. So are we happy to go to the recommendations? And that is, first of all, to note the financial and physical progress. Happy to do so. And then second of all, to agree that the budget variance.
Agreed.
Chairman, can I just ask, can I just ask that? I get that information that Stevens is getting as well, please.
Yeah, I mean, we're quite happy. I'm sure Paul can send it to all members of the committee. Okay. Tap. I'm getting a wee bit of feedback if everybody could make sure they've got their mic off. Item number 10 is updating the Dumfries and Galway Council disposal and acquisition policy. This report presents the committee with a proposed plan to carry out a review of the council's disposal and acquisition policy and a programme to bring this back to committee later this year for their consideration. Members will also note that there's a sort of planned engagement with elected members in this review. Colin Freeman is here to assist members with any queries. I'll open it up to member debate. Stephen?
Yeah, thanks again, Chair. Similar point to the last paper, but it does talk about the I think it's 3.3.3 in page 186 about the disposal of assets contributing to the annual capital receipts financial target. But I think we can probably establish that that doesn't include proceeds that are generated from the sale of common good. So any income from common goods really should go to the common good fund. So I know I mentioned it twice in quick succession, but it's just really, clearly we've missed that in the past, so it's really good to get that marker down. The other thing about this as well, obviously we are maybe ahead of the curve in terms of community asset transfers nationally, but I think we're also the ones learning the lessons. So I think if we can be careful about how we include information about non-domestic rates, so that community groups who are interested in community asset transfers have full sight of the costs. In the same way as if you're buying a house, you'd know exactly what council tax band it was in from the schedule. But I think that would be only fair, and I think it is something that we've dealt with internally already in light of a recent community asset transfer in Lockerbie. So I think officers are aware of that, and I can see Colin Freeman's there. You might be able to add something to that, but if we could maybe get those assurances, that'd be really helpful. Thanks, Chair.
No, your keenness to raise that first issue is certainly coming across, but I'll bring in Colin to answer your questions.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we are ahead of the curve, and as Councillor Thompson suggests, in terms of CATs, but we still also are learning as we go, and we are keen to pass over to community groups as much information that is relevant to their proposals as possible to make sure that they can make informed decisions on whether they want to proceed with their CAT requests or not. So we're looking to continually improve what we do and how we do it, and we'll make the necessary improvements as we go.
Okay, thank you. Jane?
Thank you very much, Chairman. 3.2.4, I was just it's a factual question. It's the notion of preliminary inquiries. is that actually a legal description, or is it very general? I'm just wondering whether you know, at what point a preliminary inquiry becomes more firmed up.
Colin.
Thank you, Chair. That's actually the language that's used in the Scottish Government's guidance in relation to community asset transfer. But I would hope as part of the review process we could agree almost a glossary of terms or definitions, so we understand exactly what terms like preliminary inquiries actually means, so we can identify at what point prohibitions would or would not apply to community asset transfers.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got no other members wanting to come in on this report, so I will move to the recommendations. Are we happy to first of all note the key issues and matters that could be taken into account in determining the policy? Take that as a yes. Recommendation 2, we're happy to agree the steps and actions required to carry out a review of the policy intent of the Council's disposal and acquisition policy as set out in paragraphs 3.4.1 and included in the proposed project plan at the appendix. Take that as a yes. And happy to note the early work undertaken to date. Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, Chair, I raised my hand. Yeah, sorry, I raised my hand instead of using the chat, but thank you for that. Just in terms of the timescale that this is going to come back to us in terms of our strategy or policy even, what effect will that have on potential asset transfers currently in train if we're changing policy potentially? And will it put a delay on the likes of consultations over common goods, for example, or other assets that might be where there's an interest being declared?
Colin, do you want to answer that?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of changing policy, we're not changing the community asset transfer policy. That is as is. So anything that's currently in that will move forward as per policy.
Okay. Thanks, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll move to item 11, which is Springfield and Gretna Green Community Assets Trust request for a long-term lease. This report presents us with a stage 2 community asset transfer request from Springfield and Gretna Green Community Assets Trust for the transfer of the Springfield Primary School changing pavilion through a 10-year lease. Colin Freeman and Stuart Hamilton are here to assist if members have any questions, and I will open up to member debate. Is there any questions or comments from elected members? Okay, Ivor.
Chair, no questions or comments other than to move the recommendations that we agree the transfer.
Okay, Jock.
I just wonder what's in the conditions with regarding the maintenance and repair of these assets if they're transferred. Thank you.
Okay, Stuart.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In relation to the standardised lease, generally all repairing requirement goes over to the transfer body. This transfer body has requested that the general repairs inside the facility will be conducted by them, and they'll bring it back up to standard because it has currently been mothballed for a number of years. So they'll reinstate all of the plumbing and maintain that. But in terms of the fabric of the building, they don't wish to transfer that over, and it is part of a school property and is an integral part of that, albeit a very small part of the overall fabric of the building. So in terms of the roof and any sort of elements of the external, the group doesn't wish to transfer that.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Okay, Jane.
I've got no difficulty at all with Ivor's agreeing the recommendations, but I presume, just for absolute clarity, we are going with a 10-year lease. Is that's what we're proposing? Because we're to agree on 2.4 from the options. And I think probably we should be explicit that it's a 10-year lease.
So that's what I would propose, and I presume that that's what Ivor was alluding to. Stephen?
Yeah, just on that very point, Chair, clearly at Arundel and Estill Area Committee, where we'd recommended option 1, So it was really just to, on exactly the same point as Councillor Maitland's raised, which is like, yes, by all means, happy to agree the transfer, but we have to specify which option it is. And I would certainly go with option 1, and hopefully that's the will of the committee.
Thank you. Apologies. I think I said option 2. I did actually mean option 1. I'm getting used to chairing this remotely. So I've got no other members wanting to speak. We'll move to the recommendations. And are we essentially happy to note all of them on block and agree option 1 at recommendation 4?
Agreed.
Yep, thank you. And we'll move on to item number 12, which is the Kukubri Development Trust request for a long-term lease. This report presents us with a stage 2 asset transfer request from Kukubri Development Trust for the transfer of an area of Harbour Square, Kukubri, through a 25-year lease for the nominal sum of £1. Colin Freeman and Ingrid Gemmell are here to assist if members have any questions, and I will open it up to member debate. Ivor.
Chair, similar to the last one, I don't have any issue with this other than within the constraints on the site. I think there's talk about putting a canopy over the Harbour Square stage. It's not in a conservation area and any planning issues because it says there's none, but it was just more to highlight to the group that if there's anything there that they need to consider.
Okay, Ingrid.
Yeah, just to say that that was a consideration for the group when they looked at what the staging would look like, and the panels that are on the structure are removable so that there is clear view. So those panels will be on when the stage is in use, but you know it will be open when it's not. So that's definitely a consideration for the group, sure.
Okay, thank you. I've got no other members who want to come in. Oh, John Campbell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just Councillor Tom previous about common good. I know it's a 25-year lease. It's £1. Would that £1 be going into the common good fund per annum?
I would certainly anticipate that would be the case, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have no other members who want to come in, so I'll move to the recommendations. And are we happy to take these on block and agreeing option 1 at recommendation 5? Silence is bliss. I'll take that as a yes. Sorry, was that somebody want to come in there?
No, just agreed with.
Excellent. Thanks, Joe. And item number 13 is any other business. I can confirm that I have no other business for today, and we'll just take this opportunity to thank you all for your attendance. And I think that is possibly a record and being finished for 12 o'clock. So thank you very much for your attendance, and I'm sure we'll see you all at the next FPT committee in a couple of weeks' time.